What's up, guys? Danny here from Geeks of Doom, and we are up to the 9th film in our MCU rewatch. And for the first 8 of these videos, I have said that we are counting down to May 7th when Black Widow comes out in theaters. And I've been doing this. I've been praying, and it serves me right. I've never been a praying person, and prayers unanswered because Black Widow was moved again to the summer, July, I believe it's the 9th. So we're 8 films in. We can't stop now. We're just going to keep going through the MCU. And it's kind of appropriate that we're up to Captain America, the Winter Soldier, and we get to see the Winter Soldier for the first time. I got this at McDonald's. Got the whole set. They were in a Happy Meals. Because we watched this right when Falcon and the Winter Soldier episode 2 premiered on Disney Plus this Friday. I loved episode 2. I thought it was a lot better than the premiere episode. I thought the premiere episode was okay, but overall I thought it was kind of boring. Whereas episode 2 puts the Falcon and the Winter Soldier together on screen, and wouldn't you know it, when you put 2 Avengers on screen together, they have good chemistry. And we ended up having a really fun, really action-packed episode, really enjoying watching Anthony Mackie and Sebastian Stan, come into their own as stars instead of playing, kind of background side characters to Captain America. And it's kind of interesting that they both have their, breakout in this film, Captain America, the Winter Soldier. Obviously, we met Bucky back in First Avenger. We're led to believe that he died, fell to his death off of the train by Hydra. And we find out here that, of course, he was saved. He was captured by Hydra. He was experimented on, given super serum, given a nice metal arm. Yeah, get him. And, he is now the Winter Soldier. We meet Sam in this movie. And we meet him, of course, through the now iconic On Your Left, thanks to Endgame, which brought that back in spades. It needs to be said right off the bat that this movie, for me, has never been one of my favorites in the MCU. And I know, before you start throwing things, I know that this movie is typically at the top of a lot of people's lists. Top 5. Definitely, for a lot of people, it's in the top 10. For many, it's in the top 5. For a lot of people, it's their number 1. For me, it never was. I always liked it, but I never loved it. And my last 2 viewings of this film have finally taken it to that next level. I think this time it benefits from a couple things. It benefits from the fact that we're doing an MCU rewatch, and we just watched Iron Man 3 and Thor: The Dark World back to back. After those 2, the next movie is just going to look good by comparison. That helps. But I think I've also grown to really appreciate this movie over the years because of so much of the subtlety of it. It's a movie that has tremendous action set pieces, but it also gives you great character work. And I really appreciated that. I think my initial, and I brought this up in my Iron Man 3 review, I think my initial hesitancy to love this movie was an issue I had with a lot of the Phase 2 movies, Iron Man 3, Thor 2, and Captain America Winter Soldier, which was, we know the Avengers exist. They've all come together, the 6 of them, the 6 main Avengers have come together, and they've fought intergalactic evil in 2012 in the Avengers. And then suddenly we're back to singular Avenger movies. And I think it, and there's always that part of me in movies like this where it's like, well, there's an attack on Washington, D.C. S.H.I.E.L.D. has been co-opted by Hydra. How is Tony Stark not involved? How is Banner not involved? Thor, at the end of Thor the Dark World, was on Earth because apparently he came down to continue his relationship with Jane Foster. Why isn't Thor brought in to, use Mjolnir and summon lightning onto the Hydra ships? I've gotten over that. And what's helped me get over this is the thing that makes the Captain America movies, especially Winter Soldier and Civil War, Civil War, it's a little more obvious, but I think what makes them the best overall movies of the individual characters is the fact that in and of themselves, they're almost Avengers movies. So, like we said, Falcon and the Winter Soldier are in this movie. Now, Winter Soldier, of course, he's the villain in this movie. But Falcon is in it. Black Widow is in this movie. And Scarlett Johansson is fantastic in this movie. And I love what I said earlier. There's so many great moments between her and Chris Evans. Nick Fury before this was always just kind of this kind of character that's there to set the plot in motion. He's the one that shows up at the end of Iron Man to initiate, the Avengers Initiative, He's the one that shows up to reveal that Natasha is Black Widow in Iron Man 2. And he has a fun scene with Robert Downey Jr. in that film. He's the one that, gets the plot going in Avengers before he, moves out of the way so the Avengers can do it. Here, he's treated like a legitimate hero. Not just is he the leader of S.H.I.E.L.D., but Samuel L. Jackson gets some kick-ass scenes. In fact, my favorite action sequence in the whole movie involves Samuel L. Jackson. My favorite of really 3 amazing action sequences, which is another thing. This film has, outside of the Avengers, probably the best action set pieces so far in the MCU. They're, right off the top of my head, watched it a few days ago with my son, the Nick Fury car chase scene where, he's under attack on the freeway. Absolutely amazing car chase, shoot 'em up scene, explosions. Finally, the Winter Soldier makes his first appearance, blows up Fury's car, and he's only able to really escape through the sewers. Then you have even my son's favorite scene was the highway scene, where you have Cap, Falcon, and Black Widow attacked by Hydra, another car chase which leads into a phenomenal shoot 'em up explosion scene, and an epic fight between, the Winter Soldier gets involved. Great fight between him and Cap. That's the scene where, the mask comes off and Cap realizes that the Winter Soldier is Bucky. Go back up, there we go. And then, of course, the finale is another great action sequences with the 3, what do you call them? I always forget the name of the hovercrafts or whatever they're called. The giant shield carriers, helicarriers, that are now a part of Project Insight, and they're supposed to start, shooting all these people. What I love most about this movie, after watching it again, this is probably the 7th or 8th time I've watched it straight through. I've done about... Every time I feel like there's a new Marvel movie, I end up doing an MCU rewatch. I did one before Endgame. I had to catch my wife up on all the MCU movies, so we did an entire MCU rewatch for her. Then we did another one. Now we're working on another one. So this is at least the 3rd full MCU rewatch we're doing. And the more Marvel movies that come out, the more you can now go back and pick out fun things. Chris Evans and Scarlett Johansson are so great in this movie. And they they're great together because their relationship really shows the moral dilemmas that Captain America has, that Steve Rogers has. At the beginning of the film, there's an action sequence on this ship in the Indian Ocean where Captain America fights Batroc, played by George St. Pierre, UFC legend, who makes an appearance in Falcon and the Winter Soldier episode 1. So he comes back. But Black Widow suddenly isn't in the fight, and she's off doing some spy stuff for Nick Fury, and Captain America is all upset with her because, mission first. And that ties, and then there's that whole idea of, the mission comes first, and you have to, be there for your partners, be there for your team. That's something that will be revisited with his relationship with Bucky later on as we move from this film to Civil War. And then, of course, it's the whole impetus for Civil War, where Cap and Tony have their contrasting views on, the government interaction in the Avengers' work. Basically, so the plot of this movie, Captain America now, the Avengers is over, and now Captain America, Steve Rogers, has to adapt himself to modern life. And we get some really great stuff right at the beginning with him running. He meets Sam. He has his book with his list of things he needs to catch up on. Sam tells him to listen to Marvin Gaye, which is some great stuff. And S.H.I.E.L.D. is working on Project Insight. Project Insight are these 3 super helicarriers that have all sorts of advanced guns and advanced weapons technology that can target the enemies. And there's a great line where Captain America says to Nick Fury, you're holding a gun to everyone on Earth and calling it protection. And that's Captain America. That's Steve Rogers in a nutshell. He was desperate to become a World War II soldier because he wanted to fight the Nazis and he wanted to preserve freedom. And what he sees in Project Insight is not protecting freedom, it's ruling through fear. And this is something I teach in my history classroom. Is it better to have individual rights and freedoms, or is it better to have safety in the nation? And should we be willing to give up certain freedoms in exchange for safety? And this is a question that's been addressed countless times in American history. I'll give you an example if you want one. The Japanese internment during World War II. People argued, we don't know if they're spies or not, but we're at war with Japan, so that means we should lock up Japanese Americans in internment camps. Other people said, well, they're Americans, you're taking away their freedom, and you know what? The Supreme Court said, yeah, it's okay, you could do that. And now we look back on that as a really dark mark in U.S. history. That's what Captain America sees here with Project Insight. You're pointing a gun at suspected bad guys before they've actually done anything wrong. In many ways, it reminds me a lot of Minority Report, which is one of the most underrated science fiction action movies ever. On the list of Steven Spielberg movies, that's one that never gets mentioned and really deserves it. I'm running on tangents now already. I already mentioned the Nick Fury car crash scene and the action sequence that takes place there. And it must have taken Samuel L. Jackson everything in his power to not give out a motherfucker during this scene, because there are so many great opportunities for it. But you forget how fucking awesome Samuel L. Jackson is. And it must be said, my my favorite movies of all time, my top two favorite movies of all time are, well, Jaws, but going with it always, contending for the top spot, is Pulp Fiction. My favorite character in movie history is Jules Winfield, Samuel L. Jackson's character in Pulp Fiction. And what ends up on his tombstone at the end of the movie? Ezekiel 25:17, the path of the righteous man, ... For me, that really, I remember seeing that in the movie theater and like going like, yeah, like giving that like a real super ovation. People around me were like, it's his tombstone. I'm like, you didn't see it, Pulp, whatever. Robert Redford is in this movie. Like, every time you think the MCU can't get a bigger actor, I mean, my God, the movie before this, Anthony Hopkins is back. Oscar winner Anthony Hopkins is back as Odin, and he had an expanded role in Thor 2. Now we get Robert freaking Redford. I believe he's an Oscar-winning director, even though I don't think he ever won an acting award. But one of the biggest legends. That's Sundance Kid. This is from The Sting, Robert Redford. And he's Alexander Pierce. He's the head of S.H.I.E.L.D. And Nick Fury starts to realize that he's not sure he can trust S.H.I.E.L.D. anymore. Especially, well, he knows he can't trust S.H.I.E.L.D. anymore after there's the attempt on his life in that action sequence. There's also tons of little character moments here, like Captain America and Black Widow going to the mall together to, they have the flash drive with all the information, all the deep Hydra information and S.H.I.E.L.D. info that Samuel Jackson, Nick Fury gave them. And just the little, the lines of their relationship. There's this cute moment where, in order to avoid being detected by, now we know they're Hydra agents, Black Widow, Natasha kisses Steve. And they have that funny moment in the car where she's like, was that your first kiss since 1945? And, it's just, there's really cute character moments without this movie ever devolving into that kind of sarcastic comedy that sometimes Robert Downey Jr. does in when he's on screen in these movies. His humor, usually I love it all, but sometimes it's a little too much. And like I said with Iron Man 3, sometimes the humor compromises the tone. That movie was a very somber movie at the beginning, and then it devolved into fart jokes with Ben Kingsley, and you're like, oh, okay. And Thor: The Dark World livens it up. It was very slow and kind of morose movie at the beginning, and then it, Darcy has her scenes where she becomes a lot of people. I like Kat Dennings. A lot of people find her very abrasive. You have Loki's comedy in the middle, which I thought livened the movie up a little bit, but a lot of people don't like that movie in general. This movie, there's a perfect balance. There is some funny stuff in it, but it never overwhelms the tone, which is incredibly important. I also didn't mention, even though I don't consider this an action sequence, but the hand-to-hand fighting in this movie is so much better than anything we've seen before in the MCU. Specifically, of course, have to bring it up, the elevator sequence. This is when Cap knows that, obviously, S.H.I.E.L.D. has been compromised. He hides the flash drive in the vending machine, gets in the elevator, and suddenly, Frank Grillo, Rumlow, and all the other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents come in. Cap knows something's up, and he has the great line that says, before we get started, does anybody want to get off? And it's just this awesome hand-to-hand combat scene in an elevator. Overtakes Die Hard with a Vengeance for best elevator fight scene I've ever seen. Although Drive has an insane elevator fight scene also. So If you haven't seen Drive with Ryan Gosling, that's a good one too. That, of course, leads to him meeting Scarlett Johansson and their friendship here. And it's truly like they evolve into a friendship here with the great dialogue. And again, the dialogue, I have to give credit again to Marcus and McFeely. They really established themselves as the key writers here. And of course, I didn't mention it, but this is the MCU debut of the Russo brothers, who would go on to only make the most successful films ever made. Actually, I think Avatar just overtook Endgame again because it got released in a few theaters in China. But Infinity War, Endgame, Civil War, billion, 2 billion, multiple billions of dollars worth of movies. The Russo brothers really took Captain America as a character and they just ran with it. And they showed in really this movie, and then more so in Civil War, and then even more so somehow in Infinity War and Endgame, that not only can they make a great Captain America movie, but they can make a great Marvel movie that incorporates all the characters. In this movie alone, you have Cap, Nick Fury, Black Widow, Falcon, Winter Soldier, Alexander Pierce, Rumlow. You have all these moving parts and characters coming together. And then my God, Civil War is basically an Avengers movie. I mean, let's face it. And then Infinity War and Endgame. We get to the Zola scene. They find that the flash drive sends them to a military base in New Jersey that Captain America is very familiar with. And we get these really cute flashback scenes. And Zola, Toby Jones from First Avenger, somehow put his mind into a computer. I don't really get it, but he basically does this exposition dump telling Captain America how he basically led a Hydra insurrection of S.H.I.E.L.D. from the inside. How they brought Zola in to show them and advance their technology, and then that became the beginning of Hydra taking over S.H.I.E.L.D. And now Hydra has completely taken over S.H.I.E.L.D., and that's basically the plot of this movie. And as I was writing down the words exposition dump, because Zola really lays on the exposition, I love this. He actually goes, well, I was stalling. And it's all a ploy because they launch like missiles at the military base to destroy Captain America. So they explain away one of my only issues with the movie, which was, wow, they're really laying on this exposition here. They explain it away immediately with, oh, was I telling you too much of the plot? I was just stalling because I'm trying to, kill you. And of course, Cap barely manages to get out of there. He uses the shield to protect him and Widow, and they make it out. They go to Sam, who he had told Captain America he flew during the war. He was a soldier and he flew. Cap says, I thought you were a pilot. He goes, I never said I was a pilot. And of course, that means he has the prototype to the Falcon suit, which is where we get Falcon. Captain America, when they go to S.H.I.E.L.D., Hydra, at the end, for the big climactic sequence, Cap delivers this amazing speech to the S.H.I.E.L.D. staff to basically have S.H.I.E.L.D. fighting Hydra in the middle of all of this. And it reminded me again of the scene in Endgame where he makes the speech and Ant-Man is just, Paul Rudd's just standing there and he's like, oh, he's so good at this. And there's that other scene I was mentioning earlier with him and Scarlett Johansson and their friendship. It's so well built in this film, and that reminded me of the scenes in Endgame where Steve and Natasha are talking about the world post, snap. And you could tell she's like on the verge of tears, and she tells him, if you try to make me feel better, I'm going to throw this peanut butter sandwich at you. And you could tell that they've become legitimate friends. And this movie plays so much into that. This is it's definitely Scarlett Johansson's best movie in the MCU until, I thought it was going to be May 7th. Now it's going to be July 9th. Who knows? By my next video, Black Widow will be coming out in 2023. I don't know. Alexander Pierce makes a great reference during the final sequence saying, Zola's algorithm is targeting the people who will prevent problems. He says we're going to save 7 billion people in order to, and by saving 7 billion, all we need to do is kill 20 million. And again, it's this, you're trying to rationalize with these plans, but it's a really clever supervillain plan. I mentioned briefly earlier the highway sequence. So much great hand-to-hand fighting. The music in this movie, it makes you feel like you're watching something grander. And where this movie was top 10, it was in the 6 to 10 category, arguably closer to 10 for me for a very long time. It took me a very long time to realize just how great this movie is. It did help that I watched Iron Man 3 and Thor: The Dark World right before it, because they're probably two of my lesser films. So this one just felt great. But man, Cap, Winter Soldier, it is definitely a contender for the top 5. It's going to have... The other movie is going to have a very hard time fighting this one off for the top 5 honors. And that's with me saying, and I won't spoil it, but there are 4 movies that I have pretty much rock solid in my top 4. In my top 5, rather. But Captain America Winter Soldier is fighting very hard for a top 5 slot, maybe even higher. We will see where it ends up. Next up is another movie, though, that is fighting for a top 5 spot. It's James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy. And speaking of James Gunn, I just want to say a few quick things, because also today was the debut of the new The Suicide Squad trailer. After the 2016 Suicide Squad, I didn't think it was possible for me to be excited about a Suicide Squad movie. Because the 2016 Suicide Squad is one of the worst movies I have ever seen. And I'm talking like, not worst comic book movies, not worst, worst. Like dog shit. This movie looks amazing. That trailer, the Red Band trailer that released today, I'm filming this on Friday night the 26th. My goodness, what an amazing trailer. First of all, King Shark. Wow. With Stallone doing the voice acting, give me a yes, please. I will take that all day. Cannot wait for that. James Gunn, like he did with Guardians of the Galaxy, you have this ensemble of mishmash characters coming together. It looks like it's going to be so much fun. The Idris Elba, John Cena eating all the dicks on a beach, if it was in the name of liberty, just jaw-dropping. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I can't wait to watch a Suicide Squad movie. My mind is blown. Amazing trailer, mostly due to James Gunn and King Shark. And also John Cena. So, that's my review of Captain America Winter Soldier. Where it ends up in my final MCU ranking, I don't know. But I think as of right now, of the 9 films I've reviewed, I think it might be near the top or at the top. Next up is Guardians of the Galaxy for me, and we'll see you next time on our MCU rewatch. Stay tuned to Geeks of Doom.